The sun rose lazily over the endless stretches of Siberian taiga, casting its early morning light in pale, trembling threads that danced upon the dark green canopy of firs, larches, and pines. Mist hovered low over the rivers, curling in delicate spirals as though the forest itself were breathing in slow, meditative rhythms. Here, in the far reaches of the Russian north, the land held a stillness almost sacred, a quietude that had endured for centuries beyond the reach of roads, railways, and bustling cities. The Evenki people, nomadic herders and hunters, moved through this world in harmony with its rhythms, attuned to its subtle shifts, knowing that the forest spoke in whispers that only patience could decipher. Birdsong punctuated the air at dawn. The call of a solitary Siberian jay echoed among the towering trees, answered by the distant cry of a hawk circling far above. Small streams shimmered under the nascent sunlight, carrying reflections of the sky and the trees in a soft, quivering mirror. Wolves left their faint tracks in the moist soil, marking paths that would remain long after they had moved on. Life in these woods was quiet, steady, resilient, and wholly self-contained. There was little need for human interference here, for the forest had its own pulse, its own language, and its own mysteries. On June 29, 1908, the forest lay in the usual serenity, the kind that inspires both awe and a gentle unease, as if the land were aware of something beyond its own comprehension. The Evenki watched the sky with the casual attentiveness of those who spend their lives in open spaces, eyes often catching subtle changes in cloud patterns or the glint of sunlight on distant rivers. They had learned, through generations of living in these woods, that nature sometimes spoke in ways beyond human understanding. Occasionally, they would witness a strange reflection on the water, a peculiar movement of birds, or a sudden, inexplicable hush falling across a grove of trees. Yet on this morning, nothing seemed unusual to most. Only a few of the elders noticed a faint flicker of light, too subtle to name, moving across the horizon. The Siberian sky stretched in an endless dome, pale and pristine in the early summer morning. Wisps of cloud drifted lazily across it, sometimes catching the sun and glowing like thin filaments of gold. There was a peculiar clarity in the air, a dryness that spoke of the continent's vast interior, untouched and untroubled by the humidity of distant seas. A river meandered through the forest below, its waters flowing with a steady, unhurried grace, reflecting the sky above like a living mirror. In the midst of this wilderness, human presence was minimal. A few scattered Evenki families tending their reindeer, traveling in small groups, living in yurts and temporary shelters, existing almost invisibly within the expanse of the forest. Yet the vastness of this land was deceptive, for beneath the calm surface of the forest and sky, the universe was preparing an event of such extraordinary magnitude that it would reshape the perception of this remote corner of the world. And though no one could have known it, the rhythms of the land were about to be disrupted in a manner both violent and majestic, a collision of celestial and terrestrial forces that would leave its mark for generations. Even the forest itself seemed to sense a subtle change in the air. The wind whispered through the branches with a slight increase in urgency, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine resin. The birds that had sung so cheerfully at dawn fell silent, as if startled by some unseen presence. A riverbank hare paused mid-step, ears swiveling, nose twitching. These were subtle signs, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, yet to those accustomed to the language of nature, they were the faintest murmurings of something extraordinary. Stories had long circulated among the Evenki of lights that moved unnaturally in the sky, of fires that appeared in the distance without smoke, of the sudden silencing of the forest as if it were holding its breath. These tales were rarely discussed beyond small campfires, told in low, reverent voices as though speaking too loudly might invite the attention of the unseen. And yet, they were stories grounded in observation, in experience, and in the subtle truths of life within the Siberian wilderness. They reminded the people that the sky and the earth were not always separate, that the cosmos sometimes intruded upon the world of humans in ways that were both beautiful and incomprehensible. As the morning progressed, the sun climbed higher, painting the forest in shifting shades of green and gold. The air remained cool, carrying the faint scent of thawing soil and blooming flora. The forest seemed alive in its quiet ways, the rustle of leaves, the soft gurgle of a nearby stream, the distant echo of reindeer hooves across open tundra. In these moments, time seemed to stretch, the day itself lingering in a suspended, almost sacred rhythm. And within this serenity, the land waited unknowingly for an event that would transform its quietude into legend. Even the human settlements, sparse though they were, existed in a delicate balance with the wilderness. A small group of hunters gathered around a fire, their breath rising in delicate clouds that dissolved into the morning air. Their conversation was soft, practical about the paths of reindeer and the best locations for fishing. They noted nothing extraordinary in the sky, save for the faint flicker of light that some would later recall with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. To them, it was a curiosity, nothing more, a detail that would fade into memory. And yet, in the days and weeks to come, these details would become the threads of a larger tapestry, woven into the fabric of a mystery that continues to captivate the world. In the distance, mountains rose like silent sentinels, their peaks catching the early light in hues of pink and silver. Rivers wound between them, carving slow, patient paths through the land, indifferent to the movements of men and beasts alike. The forest stretched beyond, dense and endless, a living monument to the quiet power of nature. And above it all, the sky remained vast, expansive, and unknowable, a canvas upon which the events of that fateful day would be painted. The afternoon arrived with little fanfare, yet an almost imperceptible shift took place. A faint haze appeared near the horizon, barely visible against the clarity of the sky. Birds that had resumed their morning songs fell silent once again. The wind, previously gentle, carried a subtle vibration, a low hum that could be felt more than heard. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that the ordinary rules of existence were about to be tested. And then, as twilight approached, the horizon blushed with the first hints of the sun's departure. Shadows lengthened across the forest floor, deepening the colors of moss and pine needles, accentuating the quiet majesty of Siberia. The Evenki families settled for the evening, tending fires and preparing simple meals, unaware that above them, the stage was being set for an event that would travel across time and space, leaving a mark on the world far beyond their understanding. In the stillness of the forest, one could almost hear the anticipation, a quiet, almost imperceptible rhythm that matched the beating of the land itself. The river flowed with unwavering patience, reflecting the deepening sky in muted ripples. Trees swayed gently, carrying with them the scent of the earth and the distant mountains. The animals, too, seemed to sense an approaching anomaly, moving with a subtle caution, pausing more frequently in their daily wanderings. There was a sense of expectancy woven into the very fabric of the land, a silent acknowledgement that the universe sometimes speaks in ways that demand attention, even if only a whisper. And so, beneath the vast and quiet Siberian sky, life continued its steady course, unaware of the extraordinary event poised to unfold in the heavens above. The forests, the rivers, the mountains, and the creatures that called this land home all existed in harmonious rhythm, oblivious to the coming spectacle that would, in mere moments, alter the very landscape and become an enduring mystery for generations to come. And so, beneath the endless Siberian sky, life flowed in quiet rhythms, unaware of what was to come. The morning of June 30th, 1908, dawned quietly over the vast Siberian expanse. The sun, a soft golden disk, climbed slowly above the horizon, spilling light over endless stretches of forest and river. Mist still lingered in the lowlands, winding among the trees like invisible ribbons, catching and refracting the faint warmth of early day. The air was cool, filled with the earthy scent of pine, damp soil, and the subtle sweetness of wildflowers that bloomed in patches of sunlight. Here in the remote Tunguska region, the forest seemed to hold its breath, maintaining a tranquil rhythm that had persisted for millennia. For the Evenki people, the day began as any other. Families stirred in their yurts, preparing fires for warmth and cooking, tending to the reindeer and gathering what provisions they might need for the day. Children, barefoot and free, moved carefully through the undergrowth, chasing small birds or stopping to watch the glint of sunlight on the river's surface. Adults observed their surroundings with practiced attention, noting the movement of clouds, the flight of birds, and the occasional distant figure of a wolf or elk. In this world, every detail of the environment was noticed and catalogued, and every irregularity could hold meaning. It was in this seemingly ordinary morning that subtle signs of the extraordinary first appeared. Observers in distant camps would later recount seeing a strange light in the sky, though at the time it was barely perceptible. Some described it as a bluish hue, moving slowly and silently across the heavens. Others noted a series of small, flickering flashes, like sparks catching on the distant horizon. Birds, which had resumed their morning songs, fell silent once more, leaving only the whisper of the wind through the pine needles. The forest itself seemed to respond, as though it had long known that the sky could hold forces far beyond human comprehension. By mid-morning, the phenomenon became more pronounced. A pale, almost ethereal glow stretched across the eastern horizon, a light that was different from the soft radiance of the sun. It flickered in subtle pulses, shifting in hue from silver to faint blue, as though the sky itself were breathing. Small streams reflected this peculiar illumination, their surfaces shimmering with an unnatural brilliance. Observers walking along the forest paths or tending to their flocks paused, sensing something unusual, though they could not articulate exactly what it was. It was not fear that gripped them, but curiosity, an instinctive awareness that the ordinary rules of the world might be shifting, even if only briefly. The air carried subtle vibrations, imperceptible to the untrained ear, yet discernible to those attuned to the rhythms of the forest. Animals moved with increased caution. A fox hesitated at the edge of a clearing, ears swiveling, nose raised to the wind. The Evenki hunters, accustomed to reading the land and its signals, felt an inexplicable stillness settle over the forest. Conversations softened. Steps became quieter. The world in these moments seemed to pause, suspended between one ordinary day and something entirely beyond expectation. As the sun continued its slow ascent, the glow in the sky intensified. By late morning, it was visible over great distances, cutting across the vast, uninterrupted canopy of Siberian pines. Some travelers reported a streak of light, long and thin, stretching like a brushstroke across the heavens. Its color shifted subtly, from bluish-white to a golden shimmer, and its movement appeared deliberate, almost purposeful. Observers could not identify its origin, nor could they predict its path. To the Evenki, these signs were not necessarily frightening. They were simply remarkable, mysterious, and deserving of quiet attention. The rivers, wide and slow, mirrored the phenomena above. Ripples caught the light in patterns that seemed to dance across the surface. Dragonflies skimmed over the water, their iridescent wings catching and scattering the soft glow. Fish below the surface moved in erratic swirls, disturbed by vibrations that traveled unseen through the currents. Every element of the landscape, the soil, the trees, the wind, the water, participated in a subtle symphony of anticipation, as if the land itself were preparing for a transformation that would leave an indelible mark on the world. For those few travelers and hunters who ventured further into the wilderness, the sky offered glimpses of its enigmatic presence. A distant flicker, a flash, a sudden glint of light on the horizon, these were the heralds of the event to come. Yet no one could have foreseen the scale of what was about to occur. In these remote expanses, where human life had little effect upon the vast rhythms of nature, the forces of the cosmos were poised to intersect with the Earth in a moment of quiet, unheralded magnitude. By midday, the unusual light had become more striking. Some observers would later describe it as resembling a moving sun, brighter than any ordinary light yet without heat, tracing an arc across the sky as though pulled by an invisible hand. Shadows lengthened and shifted strangely across the forest floor. Even the smallest details of the landscape, the delicate veins of leaves, the ripple of river water, the subtle shimmer of insect wings, seemed touched by an unearthly illumination. The forest, in all its ancient vastness, became a theater for a display both extraordinary and serene. Yet, despite the unusual spectacle, life continued. The Evenki continued their routines, the rivers flowed, the wind whispered through the trees, and the wildlife adjusted to subtle changes in their environment. There was no panic, no sudden chaos, only a profound sense that the ordinary had begun to merge with the extraordinary. Observers would later recall a quiet sense of awe, an awareness that the natural world was both familiar and profoundly unknowable, a reminder that beneath the apparent stillness of life, forces far greater than human comprehension moved silently and inexorably. As the afternoon approached, the air itself seemed to change. The atmosphere became charged with a subtle energy, not threatening, but unmistakable to those who had spent their lives reading the forest and sky. Birds circled higher, moving in patterns that suggested both curiosity and caution. Reindeer lifted their heads, nostrils flaring, sensing an imperceptible vibration traveling through the earth. The rivers shimmered with reflected light, creating the illusion of movement upon their surface even when the water was calm. Nature itself appeared to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when observation would give way to revelation. For those who would survive to recount the event, the morning of June 30th would remain etched in memory as a day of quiet wonder, a day when the sky hinted at secrets beyond human understanding. The ordinary rhythms of life, the movement of water, the flight of birds, the whisper of wind, were subtly altered, as though the universe were reminding those who watched that the world, for all its apparent predictability, remained a place of endless mystery. And so the day advanced, slow and measured, carrying the forest, the rivers, and the people through an ordinary morning that would soon be transformed by an extraordinary occurrence. In these hours, the world seemed both alive and suspended, balanced between the familiar and the unknowable. And within this balance, nature prepared itself for a moment of transformation so vast that it would ripple across time, leaving echoes in the memories of those who lived, the science that followed, and the generations yet to come. And the sky, so familiar and eternal, held secrets yet unseen by mortal eyes. As the morning of June 30th, 1908, gave way to early afternoon, the sky above the remote Tunguska region began to shimmer with a strange intensity. The air, already charged with subtle vibrations, seemed to hum softly, carrying a resonance that was felt more than heard. The vast forest below continued its quiet existence, yet even the trees, with their deep roots and centuries-old resilience, appeared to sense a presence unlike any before. Leaves trembled in patterns that no ordinary wind could create, while the rivers, reflecting the expansive sky, caught the light in surreal flashes that danced across the water. At a distance, small groups of Evenki hunters paused mid-step. Their eyes, accustomed to discerning the faintest irregularities of the land, lifted to the horizon, where the air itself seemed to bend in faint undulations. A subtle glow stretched across the sky, brighter than the sun's reflection on river water, yet strangely diffused. It moved with a deliberate arc, crossing the expanse with a grace that defied comprehension. The light was not threatening. It was impossible to ignore. It was as if the heavens themselves had opened a window to a phenomenon that was both majestic and unknowable. And then, in a moment that would reverberate through history, the sky spoke. The explosion did not roar in a conventional sense. It unfolded in a sequence of events, gentle in its unfolding yet immense in its effect. A bright, searing light appeared in the atmosphere, expanding rapidly across the horizon. Those who glimpsed it described a brilliance more radiant than 1,000 suns, yet without the oppressive heat that might scorch the skin. The forest and rivers were illuminated in a stark clarity, as if the universe had temporarily lifted a veil between the mundane and the extraordinary. The first wave of the event rippled outward, carrying a force that was immense yet delivered in a quiet, almost poetic manner. Trees swayed violently, not with the panic of a storm, but in an intricate choreography dictated by the energy coursing through the atmosphere. Branches shivered, Needles fell in spirals, and the forest floor was dappled with falling leaves and broken twigs. Rivers shivered, small waves undulating across calm surfaces. The land itself seemed to acknowledge the presence of a force beyond its ordinary understanding, moving in tandem with the unfolding phenomenon. From certain vantage points, the event resembled a celestial performance rather than a disaster. The light shifted in hues from white to pale blue to shades of gold that shimmered across the forest canopy. Shadows stretched and bent, creating patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like brushstrokes painted upon the earth. Animals, though initially startled, moved with measured caution. Birds rose in swirling patterns, tracing arcs across the sky, their movements mirroring the energy that radiated outward from the invisible source. Even the rivers, calm for centuries, carried subtle ripples that reflected the sky's brilliance, creating illusions of movement that mesmerized any observer who paused to watch. Scientific understanding would later frame this event as an airburst, an object from space entering the Earth's atmosphere and releasing tremendous energy before striking the ground. But in this moment, for those who witnessed it, such explanations were unnecessary. The sky had become a stage upon which a cosmic interplay unfolded, one that invited quiet contemplation rather than fear. The energy released was vast, flattening forests across hundreds of square miles, yet it was delivered with a grace that seemed to respect the natural order. The trees did not scream, the rivers did not rage. Everything moved as though guided by an unseen hand, and yet in the midst of this spectacle there was an undeniable majesty. As the shockwave propagated through the forest, it carried with it subtle, almost imperceptible sounds, a low, resonant hum that traveled through the ground and air alike. Observers would later describe it as a vibration felt through the body rather than a conventional noise. The earth seemed to pulse in response, a rhythm ancient and unknowable, aligning the forest, the rivers, and all living creatures with the extraordinary event above. Windows of light fractured the shadows beneath the trees, creating patterns that shifted with every ripple in the air. Even the smallest details, the glint of sunlight on moss, the flicker of a dragonfly's wings, participated in this quiet, cosmic symphony. In the midst of this, the forest was transformed. Trees hundreds of years old were flattened, their trunks lying in patterns that, when viewed from above, resembled a radial design, as if the earth itself had etched a secret diagram in response to the energy. Rivers swelled and shifted slightly in their beds, not with destruction, but with the subtle displacement caused by the shockwave. The land had absorbed the power of the airburst, yet in doing so, it preserved a strange balance, a testimony to the resilience of nature when confronted by the extraordinary. Witnesses in distant camps, though far from the epicenter, felt the magnitude of the event in ways both subtle and profound. A hunter might pause mid-step, sensing a sudden vibration through the earth, or notice a strange glare illuminating the forest in an otherworldly light. Children playing along riverbanks might stop, eyes wide, caught in the quiet drama unfolding in the sky. The Evenki elders, versed in the language of observation, understood that the event was beyond ordinary experience. It was neither a storm nor a fire, neither wind nor earthquake, yet its effects were tangible, measurable, and deeply stirring. And then, as suddenly as it began, the central brilliance diminished. The searing light faded into a pale glow, leaving behind a sky still unusual in its clarity, but returning slowly to its normal hue. The shockwave rippled outward, and the forest, rivers, and wildlife began to adjust to the altered landscape. Where the energy had passed, trees lay flattened, rivers had shifted subtly, and the air carried a faint, electric scent of ozone, a reminder that the heavens had touched the earth. For those who experienced it, the event left a profound impression. Not fear, not panic, but an enduring sense of awe, the recognition that the universe was vaster and more mysterious than one could ever imagine. Observers would later recount fragments of the day in quiet reflection. Some remembered the light, so brilliant it painted the forest in colors never seen before. Others remembered the vibration, felt not just in the feet but through the chest, a resonance as ancient as the land itself. And some recalled the silence that followed, the forest, still recovering, holding its breath once more, the rivers reflecting a sky returned to normal yet carrying the memory of what had passed above. Nature had been touched by a cosmic presence, and it responded not with chaos but with a calm, measured acknowledgement. The magnitude of the event, invisible at first yet undeniable in its effect, spread across the landscape in concentric waves. Trees fell in patterns that would puzzle investigators for decades. Rivers carried subtle changes in their current, and the air itself seemed to hum with residual energy. And even in these transformations, there was a sense of harmony, a quiet acknowledgement that the forces of the universe, though immense and incomprehensible, were not inherently malevolent. The land and the sky had conversed in a language beyond human understanding, leaving a record for those patient enough to observe and reflect. And so, as the brilliance of the Tunguska sky began to fade, the forest below slowly absorbed the extraordinary energy, settling into a new equilibrium. Life continued. Rivers flowed. Animals moved cautiously, adapting to subtle changes in their environment. The Evenki returned to their routines, though stories would later be told in low voices about the light, the vibration, and the sky's unusual behavior. It was a day that would be remembered not for horror or terror, but for its majesty, its mystery, and the profound reminder that the world contains forces beyond human perception, forces that can alter landscapes and minds alike. Thus, the heavens whispered their power, leaving only silent traces across the forest. In the quiet hours following the extraordinary brilliance of the Tunguska sky, the forest settled into a state that was both altered and strangely familiar. The initial energy of the event had passed, yet the land carried the subtle imprint of what had transpired above. Trees, once standing proud and dense, now lay in patterns both striking and deliberate, as if the earth itself had been guided by unseen hands. Their trunks radiated outward from a central point, splintered yet carefully aligned, forming an intricate radial design that would perplex those who later studied the site. In the stillness of this transformed landscape, the forest seemed to breathe, acknowledging a force that had passed through and left its mark. The air was filled with a faint, electric tang, the scent of ozone lingering like a memory of the sky's presence. Birds moved cautiously through the newly opened spaces, their flight patterns tentative yet unafraid. Small mammals emerged from their hiding places, noses twitching, ears rotating in precise attention. The rivers, which had reflected the brilliance of the event, carried ripples that were subtle yet distinct, tracing the invisible energy that had traveled through the ground and the air. In this way, the entire ecosystem seemed to adjust as one, moving with a quiet, deliberate harmony. For the Evenki people and any other distant observers, the aftermath presented a puzzle, yet one not perceived as catastrophic. Their lives, deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the land, allowed them to see patterns where others might see chaos. The forests that were once dense with standing timber now opened into expansive clearings, sunlight spilling onto the forest floor in long, dappled beams. Mosses, lichens, and small flowering plants found new pockets of light, and in this sudden illumination, the forest floor seemed to awaken, as if the energy of the event had imbued the land with a subtle vitality. The rivers, winding through the flattened expanses of woodland, appeared almost like veins carrying memory from the skies above into the heart of the earth. Gentle eddies formed in places where the shockwave had shifted sediment, and small fish navigated these altered waters with care. Dragonflies skimmed across the surface, their iridescent wings catching the residual light of the extraordinary day. The forest had been transformed, yet it remained alive, resilient, and deeply beautiful in a way that inspired awe rather than fear. Investigators, decades later, would marvel at the radial patterns left by the fallen trees, noting the unique alignment that hinted at an immense force released in the atmosphere rather than at the ground. But in the immediate aftermath, the forest itself responded in silence. Branches rustled with a gentle, deliberate rhythm, almost as though the land were recounting the story of the event to anyone patient enough to listen. Birds' calls slowly resumed their soft chorus, echoing through the altered canopy, while the wind carried whispers through the pine needles. Even the sun, now descending toward late afternoon, seemed to trace its light across the flattened trees in a subtle acknowledgement of the day's extraordinary occurrence. The wildlife of the region, accustomed to sudden changes in weather and the quiet power of nature, adapted with a patience born of millennia. Deer cautiously navigated paths through the broken forest, finding roots among splintered trunks and scattered foliage. Wolves, ever watchful, padded silently over soft soil, noting the unusual arrangements of the trees and the faint vibrations in the earth. The birds, returning in cautious groups, dipped and rose in patterns that traced the invisible currents left behind by the passage of energy. Life continued, not in spite of the event, but as a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the natural world. The forest floor, once shaded by dense layers of branches and needles, now received light in a manner that revealed its intricate textures. The subtle undulations of moss, the delicate veins of leaves, and the tiny tracks of insects and small mammals moving through the detritus. Each element seemed imbued with a quiet energy, a lingering echo of the celestial force that had passed overhead. Streams glimmered as they traced new minor channels through the soil, reflecting both the brilliance of the sky and the slow, patient rhythm of the earth itself. Observers walking through these newly formed clearings would note the interplay of light and shadow, the faint, lingering scent of ozone, and the subtle hum of life adjusting to an altered world. And yet, there was a profound stillness underlying all these transformations. Though the event had released energy of unimaginable magnitude, it had done so in a manner that preserved the essential balance of the ecosystem. No great fire raged through the forest. No sudden flood swept away the riverbanks. The shockwave had reshaped the land, yet it had done so with a quiet majesty, a reminder that the forces of nature can be both immense and measured. In the aftermath, the forest seemed to exhale, releasing the tension of the extraordinary moment while simultaneously holding onto the memory of what had passed. The human presence in the region, though minimal, began to respond in ways that were subtle and contemplative. The Evenki, observing the altered landscape, moved carefully among the fallen trees and scattered debris. They noted the radial patterns of the fallen trunks, the subtle changes in river flow, and the new patches of sunlight that illuminated previously hidden corners of the forest. Their observations, grounded in a deep understanding of the land, allowed them to see the event not as a disaster, but as a natural phenomenon worthy of reflection. Stories would eventually be told, shared around fires as evening descended, recounting the strange light in the sky, the sensation of vibrations through the earth, and the peculiar aftermath that left the forest changed yet enduring. In the days that followed, subtle shifts continued to occur. Small plants sprouted in the newly opened clearings, taking advantage of sunlight previously blocked by dense canopies. Birds nested in unfamiliar locations, adapting to the altered landscape. Rivers continued their steady course, carrying the subtle imprints of the shockwave downstream. The forest, though altered, maintained its intricate web of life, demonstrating a resilience that was at once quiet and profound. Every fallen tree, every ripple in the water, every shift in sunlight across moss and leaf became part of a living record, a testament to the extraordinary event and the enduring power of nature. And so, life returned to a rhythm that was both familiar and subtly transformed. The forest had absorbed the energy of the Tunguska Event, and in doing so had revealed the delicate balance between immense cosmic forces and the quiet persistence of the natural world. Observers, whether human or animal, adjusted to the new patterns of the landscape, moving through the altered forest with awareness and care. The rivers continued their patient journey, reflecting the sky in gentle undulations. The winds whispered through the needles of pine and larch, carrying with them the memory of a day when the heavens had reached down to touch the earth. And so, the forest began its slow, patient recovery, while the mystery lingered above. Years passed after the sky unleashed its extraordinary display above the Siberian forest. Yet the echoes of that day lingered in the memory of the land and its few human inhabitants. The vast expanse of the Tunguska region remained sparsely populated, and news of the event traveled slowly beyond the forests and rivers, carried by travelers, traders, and occasional Russian officials. The remoteness of the region ensured that the event's impact on human observation was subtle. Most of the world remained unaware of the extraordinary light, the faint vibrations, and the radial pattern of flattened trees that stretched across hundreds of square miles. It was not until the 1920s that organized investigations began in earnest, as scientists and explorers became aware that something remarkable had occurred in this distant corner of the world. Among the first to attempt to understand the event was Leonid Kulik, a geologist from St. Petersburg. Kulik's fascination was rooted not in fear, but in curiosity, the kind of slow, deliberate inquiry that sought to reconcile human understanding with the vast, often unpredictable forces of nature. He was drawn to the region not by reports of destruction, but by accounts of the radial tree patterns, strange atmospheric phenomena, and the almost mystical descriptions from local Evenki communities. Kulik's early expeditions were undertaken under challenging conditions. Siberia's landscape, already vast and remote, became even more formidable with the passage of time and the absence of detailed maps. Rivers, winding and unpredictable, served as both guides and obstacles. Dense forests slowed progress to a near crawl, and the climate, though mild in the summer months, offered sudden rains, chilly winds, and nights that plunged into near darkness. Yet the allure of the unknown was irresistible. For Kulik and those who accompanied him, the forests of Tunguska were not merely obstacles. They were living, breathing witnesses to an event that had altered the land in ways both subtle and profound. As he traveled, Kulik observed details that would become central to understanding the phenomenon. Flattened trees stretched outward from a central point, forming patterns that could be discerned only from elevated ground or, in some cases, from careful measurement of the forest floor. The trees were often broken at their base, yet some remained partially standing, caught between the force of the shockwave and the stubborn resilience of the earth. Rivers, though mostly unchanged in their course, carried subtle shifts in sediment and the occasional debris, whispering of the energy that had traveled through their waters. Even the soil seemed altered, compacted in some places, disturbed in others, yet showing no sign of fire or volcanic activity. Local accounts provided further insights, blending observation with storytelling. The Evenki spoke of the sky fire, a light that moved silently and without warning. They described vibrations that traveled through the earth, small tremors that caused no injury yet commanded attention. These descriptions, though couched in traditional narratives, matched many of the physical traces Kulik found decades later. It became clear that the event, while catastrophic in its energy, had been experienced as a phenomenon both distant and strangely detached, an extraordinary intersection of celestial and terrestrial forces that left observers both awed and contemplative. Kulik meticulously documented his findings, blending measurements, sketches, and notes with reflections on the forest, rivers, and the patterns left by fallen trees. He recorded the radial arrangement of timber, noting the distance from the presumed epicenter and the degree to which the shockwave had diminished with each successive ring of destruction. Observing the absence of an impact crater, he hypothesized that the force had been released in the atmosphere, rather than striking the ground directly, a concept that would later become central to the scientific explanation of the Tunguska event. In the meantime, the forest itself stood as both witness and archive, its trees, soil, and waterways holding memories of the moment the sky had unleashed its extraordinary power. Despite the meticulous work of investigators like Kulik, the event retained an enduring air of mystery. The forest, though altered, remained a labyrinth of life and complexity, hiding details that defied easy observation. Rivers and streams carried the faint imprint of energy, yet their waters remained clear and flowing. Wildlife, resilient and observant, continued to adapt, tracing new paths and patterns through the altered landscape. And though science began to offer explanations, the sheer scale and uniqueness of the event ensured that questions would persist, lingering like the subtle hum of energy still present in the soil and air. The Tunguska event also invited philosophical reflection. How could such a vast force occur with no warning, no direct impact, and so little immediate human observation? What did it reveal about the relationship between earth and sky, between human perception and the vast, often unseen rhythms of the universe? These questions were pondered not in haste or alarm, but in the quiet spaces of laboratories, libraries, and campfires, where scholars and local observers alike reflected on the strange intersection of the cosmos and the wilderness. The forest, in its silent testimony, seemed to offer a gentle answer, that some mysteries are not to be solved in haste, but appreciated for their depth, complexity, and subtlety. Kulik's expeditions, though groundbreaking, could only partially unravel the phenomenon. The lack of physical evidence in the form of meteor fragments, the absence of a clear impact site, and the immense scale of destruction in a sparsely populated region combined to maintain the event's enigmatic aura. Yet each measurement, sketch, and note brought humanity closer to understanding, providing a framework for future exploration and inquiry. In observing the altered landscape, measuring the radial patterns, and listening to the echoes of local accounts, investigators began to piece together a story that bridged the gap between natural force and cosmic occurrence. Even decades later, as modern science advanced and satellite imagery provided new perspectives, the Tunguska event continued to inspire wonder. The radial patterns of trees remained, as did the subtle traces in soil and waterways. Rivers reflected the sky's light in ways that seemed to echo the patterns of the explosion. And in the minds of those who studied the event, the questions persisted. What exactly had passed through the atmosphere above Siberia, and why had its energy been released in this extraordinary yet silent manner? In the quiet Siberian forest, the echoes of that day lingered long after the light had faded. The fallen trees, rivers, and undisturbed soil carried the imprint of forces that had intersected with the earth, leaving behind a record of cosmic energy, silent yet profound. Observers, human and animal alike, continued to move through the landscape with awareness and care, attuned to the subtle rhythms and whispers of a land forever touched by something extraordinary. Each step across the forest floor, each glance along the rivers, and each breath of wind through the trees became a quiet acknowledgement of an event that remained both known and unknowable, tangible and mysterious. Thus, humanity reached toward the sky, tracing the whispers of an event long past. In the decades following the Tunguska event, the world turned its gaze toward Siberia with a mixture of scientific curiosity and quiet wonder. The immense energy released that day had flattened forests, rippled rivers, and left the earth subtly altered, yet its source remained enigmatic. The absence of a conventional impact crater perplexed investigators, inviting speculation and careful study. Scholars, explorers, and thinkers from distant cities journeyed to the remote forest, seeking to reconcile observation with understanding, driven by a desire to unravel a mystery that was at once tangible and elusive. Early investigations, beginning with Leonid Kulik's expeditions, suggested that a meteorite or cosmic body had entered the Earth's atmosphere, releasing its energy in a massive airburst. Yet questions persisted. How could such an immense force be unleashed without leaving a crater? How had the energy radiated outward in patterns so distinct and uniform across the forest? And why had so few humans witnessed the event firsthand, despite its extraordinary scale? These inquiries did not inspire fear, but rather a reflective awe, a recognition that the universe sometimes reveals its power in ways beyond human expectation or comprehension. Over time, multiple theories emerged, each offering a perspective on the celestial forces at play. The most widely accepted explanation, supported by scientific measurements and historical accounts, was that a meteor, likely composed of ice or rocky material, had entered the Earth's atmosphere at an unusually shallow angle. As it traveled, friction with the dense layers of air caused the object to heat, fragment, and release an enormous amount of energy before it ever reached the surface. The result was a shockwave powerful enough to flatten trees across hundreds of square miles, yet diffuse enough to leave no direct impact crater. A silent, atmospheric explosion, majestic in its magnitude. Alternative hypotheses appeared alongside the primary theory, ranging from the imaginative to the more scientifically grounded. Some speculated about a small comet, its icy nucleus vaporizing upon atmospheric entry, leaving only the energy of its disintegration impressed upon the land. Others considered the possibility of a fragment of antimatter colliding with the Earth, a concept speculative and theoretical, yet intriguing in its elegance as an explanation for the absence of a traditional crater. Still others imagined that the event might have been caused by unusual geophysical activity, a sudden release of subterranean gas or energy that radiated skyward, interacting with the atmosphere in a manner that produced light, shockwaves, and forest damage. While each theory differed in mechanism, all shared a common thread, a recognition that the Tunguska event was a phenomenon of immense subtlety and complexity. It was not a catastrophe wrought by fire or human error, nor a storm of conventional measure. Rather, it was an interaction between the Earth and the cosmos, a fleeting collision of forces so powerful that it reshaped the landscape, yet did so with a grace and quietude that inspired reflection rather than terror. In contemplating these possibilities, scientists and observers alike found themselves considering not only the mechanics of the event, but the profound scale and intricacy of natural forces that operate beyond the bounds of daily human experience. Satellite imagery and modern studies, conducted decades after the event, have further illuminated its mysteries. Radial tree patterns, soil samples, and river sediment all point toward a powerful airburst. Small meteor fragments, though rare, have been identified, lending credence to the notion of a celestial body disintegrating in the upper atmosphere. Yet the event retains its enigmatic aura. Even with advanced tools, the exact composition of the object, its trajectory, and the precise nature of its interaction with the atmosphere cannot be determined with absolute certainty. In this uncertainty, the wonder of the Tunguska event is preserved, a quiet testament to the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of full understanding. Beyond the scientific domain, the Tunguska event inspired philosophical and cultural reflection. Poets and thinkers have pondered the significance of a force so immense, and yet so silent, of light so brilliant and yet fleeting. What does it mean when the universe touches the earth in a manner both destructive and beautiful? How do human beings interpret phenomena that exceed the scale of human imagination? In these reflections, the event becomes more than a historical or scientific curiosity. It becomes a symbol of the subtle interplay between observation, understanding, and wonder. It reminds us that nature, in its vastness, is not only a stage for human experience, but also a repository of mysteries that quietly demand attention and contemplation. Theories about Tunguska also invite comparisons with other unexplained natural phenomena. Across the globe, stories abound of meteor airbursts, anomalous lights in the sky, and unusual patterns of destruction in remote forests and plains. Some events bear striking similarities to Tunguska, suggesting that such occurrences, while rare, are part of the broader tapestry of Earth's interaction with the cosmos. By studying these parallels, scientists gain a deeper appreciation for the subtle forces that shape our world, and for the delicate balance between predictable patterns and the unpredictable influences of celestial bodies. In contemplating the Tunguska event, one must also consider the human response, both immediate and long-term. Although direct human observation was limited, the event left an indelible mark on those who heard of it, or who experienced subtle traces such as light in the sky or vibrations through the ground. Researchers, explorers, and locals all contributed to the slow accumulation of knowledge, blending careful measurement with attentive observation. The forest itself became a silent repository of data, holding within its fallen trees, rippling rivers, and altered soil the record of an extraordinary cosmic encounter. Even today, the Tunguska event serves as a bridge between science and imagination. It invites both rigorous inquiry and quiet wonder. While instruments and measurements provide clues about the mechanisms and energy involved, the profound beauty and elegance of the event remain accessible only to reflection, observation, and imagination. To witness, even in thought, the interplay of light, shockwaves, and forested landscape is to understand a scale of cosmic energy that surpasses ordinary human experience, yet does so without violence, without fear, merely with the quiet power of a universe that is at once comprehensible and endlessly mysterious. The forested region where the Tunguska event occurred continues to inspire curiosity. Modern expeditions retrace the paths of early explorers, studying the radial patterns of fallen trees, collecting soil samples, and mapping subtle shifts in the landscape. Rivers are observed for the traces of sediment redistribution, and wildlife is monitored for adaptations to the long-term effects of the event. In each observation, there is a recognition that the phenomenon was not a one-time incident, but part of an ongoing dialogue between Earth and cosmos, a reminder of the delicate interplay between the forces that shape our world and the observers who strive to understand them. And so, the theories and wonders of Tunguska exist not in opposition, but in harmony. Scientific inquiry seeks to explain mechanisms, to measure forces, to quantify energy. Philosophical reflection and cultural storytelling invite us to consider meaning, beauty, and the subtle resonance of extraordinary events within the human mind and imagination. In this duality lies the essence of Tunguska, an event that is both knowable and unknowable, observable and mysterious, grounded in fact yet reaching toward the vast expanse of the universe beyond our understanding. And so, the minds of men wandered among the stars, seeking answers that time had yet to grant. Long after the brilliant light had faded from the Siberian sky, and the shockwave had traveled its quiet path through forests and rivers, the land retained a memory of the event. Nature, resilient and patient, adapted to its new contours. Trees sprouted in broken clearings, rivers traced slightly altered channels, and the forest floor became a patchwork of old and new growth. Yet for the Evenki people and the few settlers who inhabited the region, the Tunguska event left more than just physical traces. It became a story whispered across generations, a phenomenon that blended observation, folklore, and reflection on the vastness of the cosmos. Among the Evenki, tales emerged of the sky fire, described with both awe and reverence. Elders spoke in quiet voices around campfires of a light that had traversed the heavens, illuminating the forest in a brilliance unmatched by the sun. Children listened in rapt attention, their imaginations awakened by the notion of forces beyond human understanding. These stories were not meant to frighten, but to instill a sense of wonder, that the world, even one as remote and wild as Tunguska, is alive with mysteries that extend far beyond what can be seen, heard, or measured. The stories were detailed in subtle ways, noting the vibrations felt in the ground, the peculiar patterns of fallen trees, and the fleeting glimpses of unusual light on distant horizons. In each recounting, there was an emphasis on observation and patience. Elders reminded their communities to notice changes in the wind, shifts in river currents, or sudden silences in the forest, small signals that could hold meaning when viewed with care. Through these narratives, the event became a quiet teacher, reminding all who listened that the natural world is both powerful and nuanced, capable of displaying grandeur in forms that are neither violent nor threatening. As scientific expeditions penetrated deeper into the region in the decades that followed, a dialogue emerged between traditional knowledge and empirical study. Observations from the Evenki and other local residents complemented measurements and sketches from researchers like Leonid Kulik. Patterns in the flattened forest, shifts in soil composition, and subtle traces in riverbeds all spoke of a force that had intersected with the earth above human habitation, yet without leaving conventional signs of impact. In this blending of cultural memory and scientific investigation, the Tunguska event became more than a historical curiosity. It became a bridge connecting human perception to the rhythms of a land shaped by forces both seen and unseen. The forest itself became a living archive of the event, its resilience a testament to adaptation and continuity. In the years following the airburst, seedlings sprouted amid the fallen giants, creating a layered canopy that alternated between new growth and remnants of the past. Sunlight filtered through broken branches, casting shifting mosaics across the moss-covered ground. Rivers, though subtly altered, continued their patient journey, carrying water and sediments in patterns that reflected both continuity and transformation. Even animals, some returning after the disturbance, traced new pathways through the forest, adjusting to the altered terrain while maintaining the balance of life that had existed for centuries. Human fascination with Tunguska extended beyond observation into art, literature, and reflection. Writers and poets were captivated by the event's combination of cosmic scale and subtlety. It became a metaphor for forces beyond comprehension, the intersection of heaven and earth, the delicate balance between energy and life, the quiet reminder that the world contains wonders not always visible to the casual eye. Artists captured the interplay of light and shadow across the forest, imagining the sky ablaze with colors beyond description, while philosophers pondered the meaning of forces so immense and yet so elusive. In these reflections, the Tunguska event became a symbol not of destruction, but of the extraordinary subtlety and interconnectedness of the natural world. Modern observers, equipped with cameras, drones, and satellite imagery, continue to be inspired by Tunguska's quiet majesty. From above, the radial patterns of the forest remain visible, a testament to the scale of the energy released in the air. Scientists measure the effects on vegetation and soil, yet the human experience of wonder persists. Those who visit the region speak of a profound calm in the forest, a sense that the land itself holds memory and narrative in its trees, rivers, and soils. Walking through the clearings, one can feel the resonance of the event in the gentle sway of surviving trees, the rhythm of flowing water, and the subtle hum of life that reclaims the forest with patience and grace. The mystery of Tunguska is not only scientific, it is deeply personal and cultural. It invites quiet contemplation, asking observers to reflect on the interplay between human perception, natural forces, and cosmic phenomena. It encourages patience, attentiveness, and humility, the understanding that the universe operates on scales and in manners that often exceed human comprehension. Through the stories of the Evenki, the meticulous work of explorers, and the reflective engagement of visitors and scientists alike, Tunguska exists as both historical fact and living narrative, a bridge between the measurable and the mysterious. Even today, decades after the event, the forest retains an air of quiet majesty. Sunlight filters through irregular canopies, illuminating moss, leaves, and streams in shifting patterns. Birds trace arcs in the sky that echo the energy once released above the land. Rivers carry sediment and reflection in subtle rhythms, weaving through the altered terrain as if tracing invisible lines drawn by the shockwave. And through all of it, the human imagination continues to wander, toward the fleeting brilliance that once lit the sky, toward the questions still unanswered, and toward the gentle acknowledgement that the universe is far larger and far more intricate than the day-to-day world might suggest. In reflecting on Tunguska, one is reminded that the land holds memory as patiently as the sky holds energy. Each fallen tree, each undisturbed moss patch, each ripple in a river is a quiet trace of what occurred. And within these traces lies an invitation to observe with care, to reflect with patience, and to find in the extraordinary both beauty and wonder. The event, though distant in time, continues to teach. that the world, in all its vastness, operates on rhythms beyond immediate perception, and that even the most fleeting of cosmic interactions can leave an enduring imprint upon the earth and imagination alike. And so the forest whispered its stories, carrying the memory of sky and light across the silent passage of time. Decades had passed since the sky above Siberia unleashed its quiet, extraordinary brilliance. The forest, rivers, and wildlife had continued their patient rhythms, adapting to subtle changes while preserving the resilience that had defined them for centuries. And yet, the memory of the Tunguska event lingered, not only in the radial patterns of fallen trees and the gentle shifts of river sediment, but in human imagination, in scientific study, and in the quiet reflections of those who walked the land with attentive eyes. Time, in its slow, deliberate manner, began to weave the story of Tunguska into the broader tapestry of natural history. Each season brought new perspectives. Winter's snow outlined the radial patterns of the forest, while spring's thaw revealed the subtle contours of the soil, hinting at the invisible force that had traveled through the air and ground. Summer sunlight danced across streams and leaves, offering glimpses of patterns once illuminated by the extraordinary light in the sky. And autumn painted the forest with golden hues, emphasizing the delicate balance of life that continued to thrive even amid the traces of a cosmic event. For scientists and explorers, the Tunguska event became both a subject of rigorous study and a source of quiet reflection. Radial tree patterns, soil measurements, and subtle geological clues were analyzed with meticulous care, yet each discovery brought further questions. The absence of a conventional impact crater, the variations in tree damage, the small fragments of meteorite recovered decades later, all of these revealed the complexity of the phenomenon and the limits of human understanding. Through careful observation, measurement, and calculation, scholars sought to reconcile what had occurred in the sky with what had been left behind on the earth. And in doing so, they discovered not only facts and data, but a profound sense of humility. That nature, and indeed the cosmos, operates on scales and in manners far beyond immediate human perception. Yet Tunguska's impact extended beyond scientific curiosity. The forest, still alive with bird song, rustling leaves, and flowing rivers, became a living classroom for the imagination. Poets, writers, and thinkers wandered the Siberian landscape or contemplated it from afar, reflecting on the delicate interplay between human experience and cosmic events. They marveled at the silent power of an explosion that could reshape hundreds of square miles without conventional force or destruction, and at the elegance with which the land had absorbed the energy, balancing destruction with renewal. In these reflections, Tunguska became more than an historical event. It became a symbol of wonder, of patient observation, and of the profound mysteries that the natural world offers to those who seek them. The cultural memory of Tunguska also deepened over generations. Among the Evenki, stories of the sky fire, of vibrations in the earth, and of the forest illuminated in brilliance were passed down, not as tales of fear, but as reminders of the extraordinary within the ordinary. Elders would recount these stories by firelight, emphasizing observation, reflection, and respect for the rhythms of the land. Each narrative was a quiet meditation on the interconnectedness of sky and earth, of cosmic events and human experience. Through storytelling, the event became part of the enduring consciousness of a community intimately tied to the land, linking generations across time with the subtle thread of memory and wonder. Modern visitors to the Tunguska region continue to encounter this quiet majesty. From above, the radial patterns of trees remain visible, a testament to the scale and subtlety of the airburst. On the ground, rivers still trace gentle curves, carrying sediment that echoes the invisible energy once released in the sky. Travelers walking among the forest listen to the hum of life adjusting to altered terrain, noting the interplay of shadow and sunlight on moss-covered logs, or the delicate dance of leaves stirred by a breeze that seems to carry memory. In these quiet observations, the forest continues to teach patience, attentiveness, and the deep, abiding mystery of the natural world. The Tunguska event also reminds us of humanity's place within the vastness of the cosmos. A single object entering the atmosphere, its origin many millions of kilometers away, could release energy so immense that forests were reshaped. Yet it did so without malice, without intent, without fear. It was neither a judgment nor a threat, but a quiet demonstration of cosmic force, intersecting with the earth in a manner that inspires reflection and humility. Observing Tunguska, whether through scientific study, cultural storytelling, or quiet imagination, invites a recognition of the delicate balance between human perception and the broader forces of nature. A recognition that understanding and wonder often coexist in the same breath. The land, too, continues its patient adaptation. New trees grow amid the fallen giants, rivers adjust to subtle changes in bed and flow, and wildlife navigates the landscape with inherited caution and curiosity. The ecosystem, though altered, demonstrates a quiet resilience that mirrors the broader narrative of life on Earth, one of persistence, renewal, and subtle harmony with forces far greater than ourselves. Each flower that blooms in the sunlight streaming through the canopy, each fish that glides through a shifted current, each bird that arcs through the sky, carries with it the quiet legacy of the event. A reminder that life endures, adapts, and responds to the extraordinary in ways both visible and unseen. Even now, the forest invites quiet meditation. Observers walking its paths might pause to notice the gentle sway of surviving trees, the shimmering reflection of sunlight on a meandering stream, or the soft murmur of wind through pine needles. In these moments, the mind can wander across time, imagining the extraordinary light that once illuminated the sky, the subtle vibrations felt in the earth, and the radial patterns that remain etched upon the forest floor. The land, the sky, and the observer are bound in a silent dialogue, a conversation across the ages, whispering of cosmic mystery, resilience, and wonder. In contemplating the Tunguska event, one is reminded of the profound interconnectedness of the universe. The collision of celestial and terrestrial forces, though distant in space and brief in time, continues to shape human understanding, cultural memory, and the landscape itself. Science provides insight into mechanism and magnitude. Observation allows appreciation of subtle beauty. Storytelling preserves memory and meaning. Together, these threads weave a tapestry of reflection, reminding us that extraordinary events do not always arrive with violence or alarm. They can unfold in quiet brilliance, leaving a legacy of awe, contemplation, and subtle transformation. And so, as the forest of Tunguska continues its patient rhythms, as rivers flow through altered paths, and as sunlight dances across moss and fallen trees, the mystery remains unresolved yet profoundly present. It whispers across generations, inviting those who listen to pause, reflect, and recognize the extraordinary within the ordinary. The sky, once brilliant with cosmic fire, has long returned to its measured rhythm, yet the echoes persist in the forest, the rivers, and the human mind. Time moves forward, yet the memory of Tunguska lingers, a reminder that the universe, in all its vastness, continues to intersect with the earth in ways that inspire wonder, humility, and quiet reflection. And so, the mystery rested once more beneath the quiet passage of time, leaving behind a world that continues to whisper, to teach, and to inspire in the gentle rhythms of nature,